GX Pokemon have attacks that can only be used once per game. To indicate whether a player still has access to the GX attacks, a special marker was introduced that would be flipped around once a GX attack was used. This was the first time since the original Poison and Burn marker introduced to the Pokemon TCG that they got a new marker. So in this video, we'll be looking over Pokemon with these incredibly powerful attacks. And at 10th place on this list is one of the biggest what-ifs in the Pokemon TCG in Alolan Ninetales GX. This card was from the Lost Thunder expansion, and with its Mysterious Guidance ability, search your deck for 2 item cards and put them into your hand. Its attack Snowy Wind dealt 70 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and 30 to a bench one, which was a decent attack if you ended up using it, but this card was primarily used as a way to set up, especially when paired with Alolan Vulpix from Guardians Rising. Its attack Beacon allowed a player to search their deck for up to 2 Pokemon, providing excellent early game consistency before being able to evolve into Alolan Ninetales GX and giving you access to your important item cards afterwards. Since we're talking about GX cards in this list, we should mention its GX attack, even though it wasn't really what made Ninetales good. Sublimation GX could knock out an Ultra Beast Pokemon, a subcategory of Pokemon that were first released in the Crimson Invasion and received some new support in Lost Thunder. When Alolan Ninetales GX was first introduced, it became an immediate inclusion in many slower decks to get access to important setup cards like Rare Candy, an item that allows the player to evolve a basic directly into a Stage 2. But it also found space in some faster builds to find key items in early turns to quickly put on pressure with the right resources. For the majority of the Lost Thunder format, Alolan Ninetales GX remained a solid option, but never fully got back to the immediate impact it had upon release. Everything completely changed for this card when the next set Team-Up entered the game and brought with it a powerful Tag Team GX Pokemon, Basic Pokemon GX with high amounts of HP and incredibly powerful GX and regular attacks. This giant power creep completely wiped Alolan Ninetales GX from the tournament scene, and the card that once looked so powerful and crucial for multiple strategies became a bulk card that most players wouldn't even deem worthy to take out of their binder. Under different circumstances, or with an early release, we could have seen the card dominate the metagame for a long time, just like some of the upcoming cards did. Our next card, Buzzwole GX, was released in Crimson Invasion, a set that, right from the beginning, wasn't considered particularly great by players. In fact, the set was so bad that you could find it all over the shelves no matter where you went. The first tournament that featured Crimson Invasion was the European International Championship in November 2017. Buzzwole GX immediately made an impact to the surprise of many players, and multiple decks featuring it as their main attacker ended up making it to the top 8 of the whole event. While needing multiple fight energies for its Absorption GX and Knuckle impact attacks, Jet Punch was able to provide good enough early game pressure by dealing 30 damage to active Pokemon and 1 bench Pokemon for just a single fighting energy. Especially when combined with cards like Strong Energy that added 20 damage to attacks from fighting Pokemon, and Choice Band that added 30 damage to attacks done to GX Pokemon, Buzzwole GX could quickly pressure multiple Pokemon at once for decent damage. Even powering up its higher energy cost attacks wasn't incredibly difficult. Max Elixir checked the top 6 cards of the deck for a basic energy and attached it to a bench Pokemon. Because of Absorption GX's high damage output in the early game, specifically dealing 40 damage for each of your remaining prize cards, it was often used to initiate the prize trade, unlike many other GX attacks that were used in later stages of the game. Knuckle Impact with its basic damage output of 160 would be able to apply even more pressure, or in combination with the previously mentioned damage modifiers, pick up knockouts all by itself. Multiple good attacks in combination with a base HP of 190 gave this card an incredibly strong stat line to begin with. The main reason for it being overlooked was its weakness to Psychic, which was among the best types in the game during its release, but eventually turned out to not be a high enough hindrance to stop it from being played. At first, Buzzwole GX was played in hyper-aggressive decks that tried to overwhelm opposing strategies with high-pressure attacks, but towards the end of its lifespan, it also found its way into slower strategies, proving how versatile even a card that looks as one-dimensional as this card could be. Looking back at its success and multiple different strategies it's played in, it can be certain to be said that Buzzwole GX was among one of the best GX Pokemon. Blacephalon from Lost Thunder was a card packed with powerful attacks and makes it our number 8 spot on this list. Its attack, Burst Burn, left your opposing Pokemon burned and confused, causing non-negligible chip damage and also potential disruption for your opponent's strategy, as the confused condition, which left the Pokemon able to retreat but had a small downside when attacking, would always mean that they had to either switch out their Pokemon, or risk taking 30 damage when attacking and flipping tails. While the small damage from the burn and confusion might not seem super relevant, it had a lot of uses for Blacephalon GX's second attack, Mind Blow. For 2 energies, you can put any number of energies attached to any of your Pokemon into the Lost Zone, and this attack would deal 50 damage for each of them, allowing for knockouts on any Pokemon, as long as you had enough energies. The Lost Zone is an out-of-play area, meaning that any energy put into Lost Zone would be gone from the game forever, and it was blessed with plenty of ways to get additional energies into play. Released in the same set of Blacephalon GX was Naganadel with its Turning Point ability. Once per turn, it could attach a basic energy from the discard pile to itself, which could be used up to 4 times with the max count of them in play. A few sets later, Ultra Beast gained the powerful item card Beast Ring, which attach up to 2 basic energy cards from your deck to your Ultra Beast Pokemon, as long as your opponent had either 3 or 4 prize cards remaining. Fast forward a bit and Pokemon released the Welder support card that attached up to 2 fire energies to any of your Pokemon and drew 3 cards on top of that. All of these powerful energy acceleration cards allowed Blacephalon to always stay somewhat relevant to the meta, even if it wasn't among the best decks. Lastly, Blacephalon GX also had one of the best GX attacks in Burst GX. This attack discarded one of your face-down prize cards and attached it to one of your Pokemon if it was an energy card. Even without being able to attach potential energies, this attack was already very strong, as discarding a prize card would mean you didn't have to take that prize card anymore by knocking out one of your opponent's Pokemon. Its longevity in the game due to its powerful attacks gets Blacephalon GX a well-deserved spot on this list. And at 7th place, we have Lycaroc GX. While primarily used for its Bloodthirsty Eyes ability, which could switch one of your opponent's Pokemon with their active one once you put this card into play, it also came with 2 solid attacks. Claw Slash had a base damage of 110 that could be further boosted by a multitude of damage modifiers present in the game at its time, including the aforementioned Strong Energy and Choice Band. Dangerous Rogue GX forced your opponent to be careful with their bench management, as it did 50 damage for each of their bench Pokemon, which made it a powerful option to pick up big knockouts against opponents who would overbench, even if by only 1 extra Pokemon. Both these attacks weren't quite good enough to establish Lycaroc GX as the main attacker for any deck, but the utility that its Gust ability provided to many decks that couldn't afford to use supporter cards like Guzma, which switched one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon while also forcing you to switch, made it a valuable tech inclusion in a lot of decks. Arguably, the best deck that makes use of this card was Buzzwole/Lycaroc, a deck that used Buzzwole GX, which we already featured in this list, as its main attacker. Lycaroc was the perfect partner, as it didn't only provide its amazing ability, but also shared its energy type with Buzzwole GX, which meant you didn't have to run any different kinds of basic energy other than fighting. Lastly, it didn't share its weakness, which meant that you could use Lycaroc GX against Psychic-type decks that would normally easily deal with Buzzwole GX. This combination of cards achieved great things by winning multiple championships and was even considered the best deck by some players for a period of time. Next up is Golisopod GX, a grass-type Pokemon that featured 3 great attacks. Its first attack, First Impression, dealt 30 damage for 1 energy, which, let's be real, isn't that amazing. But if this card became your active Pokemon during the turn you use this attack, the damage is increased by 90 to a total of 120, which is pretty good for just 1 attachment. But Golisopod GX didn't just shine at dealing a lot of damage for a little energy. Its second attack, Armor Press, used a little more energy, requiring you to use 1 grass and 2 colorless energy to deal 100 damage and receive 20 less damage during your opponent's next turn. In combination with double colorless energy, this attack could be used immediately after First Impression, which was one of the main ways to make use of it. This card's GX attack, Crossing Cut GX, required the same energy cost as Armor Press, but dealt 150 damage, and made you switch out Golisopod GX with one of your bench Pokemon. It synergized well with First Impression, but could also just help to get this card out of harm's way to use it in back-to-back turns without it being damaged. Some of the frequently used cards in combination with First Impression were Acerola, a supporter card that lets you pick up one of your damaged Pokemon and all cards attached to it. This allowed you to switch between Golisopod to keep using First Impression for quick damage, but also provided healing at the same time, and Guzma, which provided you with 2 useful effects to combo with this card. On one side, you could use the First Impression damage to take out Pokemon that your opponent tried to set up on their bench by pulling them up on the other side. Guzma's switching effect on your side provided you the way to get into a different Golisopod to activate First Impression's additional effect. From its release in Burning Shadows, it immediately found great success, placing highly at the 2017 World Championships, but eventually got phased out of the game due to the increasing power creep. And at number 5, we have Gardevoir GX. Its Secret Spring ability allows you to attach 1 fair energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. This provided very good energy acceleration, especially if you managed to set up more than just 1 Gardevoir GX. This kind of energy acceleration was exceptionally useful with its Infinite Force attack that dealt 30 damage for each energy attached to this card and your opponent's active Pokemon. Damage like this could stack up incredibly quickly, especially when factoring in the potential for multiple copies of this card in play and the use of double colorless energy, which would always supply 2 energies and therefore an extra 60 damage. This meant that even if your opponent's active Pokemon didn't have a lot of energies attached to it, Gardevoir could quickly reach knockouts, which forced players to be very careful about their attachments when facing this card. Twilight GX is arguably one of the best GX attacks we've ever seen, allowing its owner to shuffle 10 cards from the discard pile back into the deck. This meant that Gardevoir decks would have access to more than 4 copies of many powerful cards, which quickly put on the map as one of the best decks after its release in Burning Shadows, and didn't take long for it to prove its worth. Only a couple of weeks after its release in 2017, it was able to take down the Pokemon TCG World Championship in the Masters Division, the highest group. Afterwards, it remained one of the best decks for a while, and even when the power creep caught up to it, it was able to find new partners to stay relevant until its rotation. And at number 4, we have Decidueye GX, one of the first ever GXs released in Sun and Moon. Its Feather ability allows you to put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, something that can stack up very quickly with multiple Decidueye GX in play. Razor Leaf is a pretty average attack, dealing 90 damage for 1 grass and 2 colorless energy, but could often provide necessary damage pushes to finish off opposing Pokemon. For just 1 grass, its GX attack Hollow Hunt GX puts 3 cards from your discard pile back into your hand, giving you new access to some of your more valuable options. Just like Gardevoir GX that we just featured. While Razor Leaf wasn't a particularly bad attack, Decidueye shined most when it was able to sit on the bench in its supporting role by consistently chipping away opposing Pokemon with Feather Arrow, especially decks that could utilize Forest of Giant Plants. A stadium card that allowed players to immediately evolve their Pokemon without having to wait a turn could make great use of this card by getting into play as soon as turn 1. Most attackers that were paired with it could either deal damage to your opposing bench or were able to deal high amount of damage for little energy. One of the most common partners in any kind of Decidueye deck was Espeon EX. Its Miraculous Shine attack put the highest stage of each of your opponent's Pokemon back into their hand, which meant that with the correct setup and Feather Arrow damage, you could pick up some easy knockouts on other GX Pokemon that would have over 200 HP, but suddenly didn't even have 100 HP due to their weak 1 stages or basic Pokemon. You could even take this combination as far as devolving their entire field and winning in 1 turn without ever taking any prize cards before that. While it wasn't the meta threat that it used to be towards the end of its life cycle, it still managed to find its way into some decks due to its consistent value as a damage modifier and its extremely versatile GX attack. And at number 3, we finally get to the GX Pokemon that completely changed the game when they were introduced. So at their place, we have Dedenne GX with its Dedenne Change ability. This ability lets you discard your hand when you put this card onto your bench to draw 6 new cards. Pokemon realized how powerful this ability was and gave it an extra clause that prevented you from using more than 1 Dedenne Change ability per turn. But this didn't stop Dedenne GX from being one of the most played cards during its time. It also featured 2 attacks that were rarely ever used, as most decks purely used it as a draw option and didn't run any lightning energy. Static Shock deals 50 damage for a lightning energy and a colorless, and its GX attack, Tingly Return GX, also deals 50 damage for the same exact cost, but on top of that paralyzes the defending Pokemon and returns itself and all cards attached to it to its owner's hand. Paralyze left the defending Pokemon unable to retreat or attack until a full turn had passed, leaving it stuck in the active. Some decks could use its GX attack in desperate situations, but overall you rarely ever saw Dedenne attack. When it was first released in Unbroken Bonds, this card still had to compete with other, better support Pokemon. But as soon as they were gone, Dedenne GX was featured in every deck that didn't try to play with only Pokemon that gave up 1 prize card, or tried to use unique support cards that prevented it from using this card. This didn't mean that Dedenne GX was underplayed before. It saw immediate Tier 1 impact upon its release and remained in that spotlight until its rotation. Even when games could be lost by having 160 Pokemon on your bench that gave your opponent 2 prize cards as rewards for being knocked out, the draw power Dedenne provided was too good to pass up for many decks, making it one of the best support Pokemon of all time. One of the support Pokemon that slowed down Dedenne GX by a bit is in our second place list, Tapu Lele GX. This card combined everything that you could ever ask for from a support Pokemon in the Pokemon TCG. Its Wonder Tag ability allowed you to search your deck for a supporter card and put it into your hand when you put this card into your bench. Unlike most other support Pokemon, it also came with a useful attack. Energy Drive dealt 20 damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon at the cost of 2 colorless energy, which could easily be fulfilled with either 2 separate attachments or a double colorless energy. Its only downside was that it couldn't hit the opposing Pokemon for weakness. This card's GX attack, Tapu Lele GX, healed all damage from 2 of your bench Pokemon for 1 psychic energy, something that wasn't done frequently because not all decks had access to psychic energies. But if a deck could make use of it, this provided a lot of potential value if the opponent would struggle with picking up a knockout on one of the main attackers. Topping all of these things off was the fact that, unlike most other Pokemon at the time, Tapu Lele GX didn't have any weaknesses, meaning it would be much harder for your opponent to pick up 2 prizes on your support Pokemon. Even today, more than 5 years after its release in Guardians Rising in 2017, Tapu Lele GX would still see play in many current decks, showing how far ahead of the time this card was and how many good things a Pokemon card could have on it. Pokemon acknowledged its historic value and gave it a special printing in their 25th anniversary set celebration. After the praise that Tapu Lele GX just received, it's hard to imagine that a card could be even better than it. And in first place, and the best GX card ever printed, is Zoroark GX. Its trade ability discards 1 of your cards in your hand to draw 2 new ones. This could be used once for each Zoroark GX you had in play. This card's Righteous Beating attack dealt 20 damage for each Pokemon you had in play, meaning under normal circumstances it could deal up to 120 damage for 2 energies. Usually a double colorless energy would do the job. Now, just like the previous 2 entries, its GX attack was rarely used. For 2 darkness energies, Trickster GX copied any of your opponent's Pokemon's attack, including their GX attacks. You might ask yourself why an attack this versatile and potentially powerful was rarely used, but just like Dedenne GX and Tapu Lele GX, the answer is simply that most Zoroark decks didn't play darkness energies. While its ability and regular attacks were solid, this card's true power came from its versatility. While being legal for playing the Pokemon TCG, there have been countless different decks that made use of Zoroark GX and the incredible consistency power that trade could provide, while also having a useful attack. Almost every card could be paired with Zoroark GX, which put player creativity at an all-time high. Even if many of those didn't end up being more than fun ideas to toy around with, it still ended up in many different Tier 1 archetypes that won international events like the World Championships in 2018. A lot of players that played in recent history even argue that Zoroark GX is the best Pokemon that has ever been printed. And when looking back at how successful it was in tournaments and how often it was able to readapt after players ruled it out as a top deck, it's hard to argue against it, giving it a rightful place as the best GX Pokemon. Alright, that's the list. If you know of any other good cards I may have missed or have ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.